Okay, science students, here's another example of a scientific method. So I'm going to make you a research biologist working for the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, and you've uncovered something bad that really happened. Let's take a look. When oil spills into the soil from leaking oil tanks, the common method is to remove it. The common method to remove it is a volatilization, which is disruptive to the environment and very expensive. So they just take off all the topsoil, as you can see here. And it is very expensive, very disruptive. Okay? You've been assigned the task of finding a more environmentally friendly means of cleaning up petroleum spills. Is there another way? Okay. Your question is, how can oil be cleaned up by using natural methods? So that's the question. That's the causal question. Here you see our 5-step approach. Causal question. How can oil be cleaned up using natural methods? You begin by making some observations. Okay. You go to 3 different places where a large amount of oil had been spilled into the ground recently and take some oil samples. Tests on each sample indicates that sample 1 and 2 are still heavily polluted with oil. However, sample 3 shows very little oil present. Let's take, why, I wonder? Further tests show that this sample has abnormally high numbers of certain bacteria. Okay, the Pseudomonas and aeruginosa and the Pseudomonas pseudo-alkaline genes. Those 2 bacteria, okay, I'm going to call them PSA and PSPE, okay, but wow, wonder what those things, why is there high numbers of those? Okay. Based on your observations, write 2 hypotheses on your paper that try to explain why sample 3 is no longer heavily polluted with oil. Did you come up with these hypotheses? That the PA bacteria is getting rid of oil? Could that possibly be? Okay. Oil, by the way, is a fossil fuel, isn't it? It is actually an organic substance. In other words, it used to be alive, okay? Fossil fuels, coal, oil, gasoline. So oil at one time was something, came from plants, animals, etc. Okay? So did the other bacteria, okay? It's a fossil fuel. It was, and so could the bacteria just be eating it? That'd be interesting, huh? You may have gone farther in your explanation. You might have said that the bacteria was eating the oil or changing it somehow. That's a funny illustration, isn't it? Okay? So, our next step is to test our hypothesis. We want to find out which bacteria is getting rid of the oil. Maybe they are both eating the oil. How can we find out? Write down an experiment for each hypothesis. Briefly describe how you would test your ideas. So we do our observations, we have the causal question, we do our observations, we come up with a hypothesis, but then we got to test our hypothesis, don't we? We have to have an experiment that can, figure out what's going on here. Okay, so there are no limits to testing. You're only limited by your imagination, okay? And I'm going to give you a little bit of time, so see if you can come up with, that'll be the end of this little video. But how would you go about testing this? Okay? Be back to you soon.